Happy New Year, everybody. I know we're 5 days into the year 2025 already, but since this is my first video of the new year, I hope everybody had a great start to the new year. And even though we have a men's basketball team that is on fire right now after beating Kansas on the road, winning at home against Oklahoma State, they're the talk of the town, also nationally in college basketball right now. I still want to stick with football because now, about a month in, now that the coaching staff pretty much is set, I felt like coming on a few times right there, right at the end of the new year to kind of recap 2024, some of the things that we've learned, also like right after the new year, to say kind of like what am I looking ahead to for 2025. So I thought it was a good time now to come on here and talk about the overhaul that head coach Rich Rodriguez has made to the football program itself. I said whenever he was hired that a reckoning was coming. And there are some things that I like in the last month. There are some things that I'm kind of in a wait and see, indifferent kind of mode. And then there are some things that I don't like. So I want to talk about that for this video because we do have some kind of conclusions that we can draw from 2024 that can apply to right now as we look ahead to 2025 and what they mean. So, starting it off, I think I want to start positively, a minute and a half in. If you only tune into this video for a short period of time, some of the things that I like, well, first and foremost, that I think can apply to this whole situation is what Ren Baker, what we as fans, as Mountaineer fans, are hoping for. And we're banking on, we're putting our heart and soul, money, everything as fans into this, is the prospect that head coach Rich Rodriguez is going to be able to, recreate the past, catch magic in a bottle, and develop players who are more of the, diamonds in the rough to be, all-star players. Like you think back to, I think like Pac-Man Jones in the early 2000s was a 3-star. We know Pat White was like a 3-star wide receiver prospect that was about to go to LSU. Steve Slayton was a 2 or 3-star, something like that. Dan Moses, so many of the unsung heroes across the WVU defenses for years upon years. It wasn't like West Virginia was having this killer recruiting like they were, USC or Florida or any of Notre Dame or any of these traditional blue blood programs. But what we're putting our hope and faith in as Mountaineer fans is that Rich Rodriguez can identify talent and then with the help of his coaching staff can develop talent in a way that, again, you're finding a 2-star player and you're making them a 3-star player, a 3-star player, a 4-star, et cetera, et cetera. I think that's what we as fans 20 years ago had hoped, is that as West Virginia ascended into the national spotlight with Pat White and Steve Slayton, that some of that recruiting would take a step up. And it did. It definitely did. The way that West Virginia recruited, you can remember if Rich Rodriguez might have not went to Michigan, West Virginia was in on the number 1 prospect in the country, Terrell Pryor, out of Jeannette, Pennsylvania, down to West Virginia and Ohio State before Rod took the job at Michigan, and then he chose Ohio State. And again, shortly thereafter, Bill Stewart landing Geno Smith, Tavon Austin, Stedman Bailey, and how that parlayed into the Dana Holgerson era, finally capturing Will Grier at the end of it. So, looking at this roster of what's transpired is we are putting our hope and faith in that first and foremost, a staff would come together, and that's what I'll talk about for this video. But also that these staff members are going to take the players who are dedicated, loyal, bought into the culture, not there coaxed by NIL dollars, fundamentally want to be at West Virginia, and will put their heart, sweat, tears, everything into it over the course of this offseason, which will be the hardest offseason you would expect in, many, many years for West Virginia football, that they're going to stick it through, develop that hard edge, earn success, and like it's going to pay dividends in wins and losses on the field. So that is what we as fans are buying and hoping into, because it is hard, I feel like, as a Mountaineer fan right now, to not feel a little bit antsy, to feel like, oh, there might be some red flags, some sirens here and there. And that's kind of where I want to lead off. I do want to lead off positively, but the thing that concerned me the most, that I was just really not prepared for as a Mountaineer fan, were so many star departures. And is this generational? This is just Gen Z, kind of clashing with the, boomer or Gen X kind of mentality of, entitlement, or, you know what I mean? Like, the development of NIL and the transfer portal these days is there are so many players who only care about the name on the back of the jersey. They don't care what, team name is across the front of the jersey, who they play for, so on and so forth. And that's unfortunately what I think within this transition you knew was going to happen, that players were going to leave. But I thought that more starters from these last couple of years were going to stick it through. We're going to stick it around. First and foremost, my guy C.J. Donaldson, who I've been, a fan of since the first game that he played in the Backyard Brawl 2022. He's ground. He's the Warhammer. I think he was incorrectly used and underutilized by Neil Brown, but also, especially more so this season than any other season, but also, suffering through some injuries, which isn't anybody's fault. It just, that is the sport that West Virginia plays. But then, signing with Ohio State, choosing to go for the money rather than the opportunity, because I do think that in Rich Rodriguez's system, he would be a home run. I think they could divvy up the carries with Jaheim White just like this past season, and both would be able to be as successful as they've ever been. But on one season, C.J. Donaldson's not going to bet on himself, going to bet on the almighty dollar, cash in as much as he can. And if he gets his opportunities at Ohio State, good for him. But that hurt when it continued to compound all the way down to Hudson Clement. And that's the thing I think that's unfortunate, is Neil Brown never establishing the kind of leadership style and culture in which players felt as if they owed West Virginia more so than West Virginia owed them. And I think that this unfortunately is a downstream effect from years ago when the transfer portal, became a thing in collaboration with NIL, that Jamal Adai goes to Georgia and then goes to Miami, and with him he steals Tyke Smith first to Georgia, then Akeem Mesidor, Darrell Porter, and there was just this perception that, and it might have been fact, it might have been true, because of Shane Lyons being the athletic director, that West Virginia didn't have its NIL affairs in order to be able to pay these players. And Shane Lyons had a hard no stance that West Virginia wasn't going to be part of the Wild Wild West. Stay compliant. Stay, clutch pearls to the rules in a ruleless society now of the NCAA. And with that, there were so many players who thought, I can do better than this. West Virginia's not going to pay me. We're not winning. We're not getting developed. We're not contending for conference championships. We're not going to the NI. I'm going to seek other pastures. And it finally, I felt like that washed itself out of the system in 2023. But then seeing how many players, which I celebrated at the time, was congratulatory to other Mountaineer fans, Country Roads Trust with their $1 Million May campaigns, everything that they did last season to retain so many of the stars. Now, Donaldson included, Jacoby Spells, I think Nico Marchiol was one of the later people to finally, subscribe to the trust, or how, partner with the trust. But I mean, there were just NIL deals getting thrown out left and right, and that's different than what's coming now with TV revenue sharing and everything like that. It seemed as if last year, remember all those announcements that were coming out on social media, this player's, inked with the trust, this player's in with the trust. Then you thought, okay, those players are coming back. So, seeing that trickle in over December into January and onward to the spring, it just seemed like maybe that maybe there were more players again who were just playing for the money and didn't necessarily, buy into the culture. And I think that's the case with Hudson Clement, being a guy, come from Martinsburg High School, being a true walk-on. Getting West Virginia is the only Power 4 school to offer him a walk-on position. Then he earns a scholarship. Then he gets an NIL deal. Like, I just think there are a lot of me-first players on the team, similarly to like last season's basketball team. And I know that that's the day and age of today's college football world, but there are fewer. There are fewer, it seemed like, Zach Frazier's of the world than there were of, unfortunately, a guy like a Hudson Clement. So it's a mixed bag. I think like a case of Rodney Gallagher, very dedicated, has wanted to be a Mountaineer since he was a little kid, bought into West Virginia. And even though, there was the worry that Neil Brown, if he would have been fired after 2022, that West Virginia wasn't getting Rodney Gallagher out of high school as a commitment. But now that Neil Brown's been fired, he's stayed and kind of been one of the guys trying to keep the gang together. So that's what I would say. That I'm going to kind of bounce back and forth between things I don't like, things I do like, and things I'm kind of ready to wait and see on. Is I didn't think West Virginia was going to lose so many of its best players. Josiah Trotter, Tomas Remack, projected starting left tackle and Johnny Williams, again, C.J. Donaldson, Hudson Clement, Traylon Ray, at linebacker Trey Lathan. It's just like, oh my gosh, if Rich Rodriguez in tandem with the trust and the administration are taking this hardline stances, I don't care who you are. I don't care what you've done in the past. This is what we're doing moving forward. If you want to stay, more than happy to have you. If you want to hit the door and, the portal and explore your options, then don't let the door hit you, where the good Lord split you, and he's going to go find somebody else instead. So that is what's concerning to me. That is concerning that I'm taking a wait and see kind of approach, but the what we saw, how the transfer portal decimated West Virginia going into 2021, going into 2022. We have to put our faith and trust that West Virginia is going to be able to identify those guys. And if Rich Rodriguez can do what Neil Brown couldn't do, I know that West Virginia is bringing on a new general manager in Chuck Lilly from Oklahoma. But if he's the one, at the end of the day, doing the talent evaluations on these high school prospects, or if he's just saying, blanketed, like whoever wants to come here, let's take them, let's work them out, let's see how they go through spring practice, let's see who stays and is good enough to stay or who's not good enough to stay, let them hit the portal once again, whether that be, I think this is a terrible time for the early enrollees out of high school. Because they're going to come in, they're going to have this whole new off-season conditioning workout program and spring practice, and it's going to be, the weeding out of the week. And those guys aren't going to get it until the summer, and they come in, and if they can make it through fall camp, so you know what I mean, like you're getting it double. But that's what you want. And that's unfortunately what I think that West Virginia wasn't getting out of Neil Brown. Life lesson learned from last year is that, spring has to mean something. There has to be competition, not going through the motions. I said in a video last year that I thought West Virginia should have played Marshall in its spring game. Hit somebody differently than the team that you've been facing in practice every single day. So that's what I'm kind of very concerned about, is the attrition that West Virginia's taken on the roster. Now, if you're someone of of ilk, and I know some people having talked to them, it's like, they didn't care who left. Wash them all out, and start anew. See what Indiana did by bringing in all of its James Madison players over. Yeah, you did see that. So that's why I'm kind of in a wait and see mode on that. One of the things that I really like, though, so far has been the hiring of defensive coordinator Zach Alley. Not only because I think he's one of the wonderkins of college football. He's 30. So I'm 31, so it's like, the equivalent of me, someone my age coaching at the Power 4 level. So not only am I super, supportive of the guy, hope he does the best that he possibly can, but also for how he's going to spurn Oklahoma in doing so. You've seen the uprising of fans on social media. A program who I think is now just Crimson and Cream Nebraska, a has-been, and kind of wandering in the desert aimlessly of the SEC now, trying to ride into the coattails of Texas because those two tried to kill the Big 12. So happy to have him on board. Think that he can be multiple, and he's going to have to, unfortunately, be multiple because he's playing with all these plug-and-play parts of how this roster is going to develop. So we might see finally 4 down linemen on the defensive side of the ball. We might finally see more players blitzing from the secondary, so those disguised blitzes. What I think will be very interesting to watch, though, when talking about Zach Alley, is the relationship and dynamic with a former West Virginia defensive coordinator who's now back on the staff in Jeff Castile. So very interesting. The millennial to boomer Gen Xer kind of dynamic. A guy again who was a defensive coordinator here for many seasons. Although Alley is apparently getting full control, getting call the plays the way that he wants to see, call plays. Didn't leave Oklahoma and lose that co-defensive coordinator title to not get all of these promises. To choose West Virginia after a bidding war between the two schools, and he's bringing in some of his guys, or bringing in Chuck Lilly from Oklahoma to have some of these other JMU guys that he worked alongside with whenever he was there with Coach Rod. So buying in to Coach Rod and what the prospects for him personally and for this team for the future, and you're spurning Oklahoma. The only thing that I hope now, and we'll have to follow over these next few weeks, is can he bring any Oklahoma players over, or at least attract them enough to visit? That's what I have yet to see over the week or so that he's yet to be hired. Seeing, Lewis Carter or something, a linebacker choosing UCF, you would have hoped that he would have given West Virginia a shot. But I don't know if those Oklahoma players are more so just disappointed and, ticked off at Alley that they don't want to follow him anyway, only being there a year. But you'd love to see some of those former 4-star high school talent come from Oklahoma over to West Virginia. That's what's funny is it seems like West Virginia is like Oklahoma East, Jacksonville State North, and it's West Virginia of 15, 20 years ago. Again, with Castile coming on board, with Noel Devine coming on as an analyst, Blaine Stewart again still being retained, the son of former head coach Bill Stewart and Rodriguez's right-hand man. So it's so interesting to see how this is played out. Another thing that I've really liked is the retention of running backs coach Chad Scott. Though he loses that co-offensive coordinator title, or we'll see how it goes, but I think what is both professionally and personally for Chad Scott, why this is a benefit, is that he'll get to learn from a better head coach, one who is competent at calling plays, in Rich Rodriguez. Once Chad Scott kind of got out of that first quarter rut, that mold of trying to be way too conservative and traditional in the way that he coached the Frisco Bowl, the Frisco Coffee Bowl, he kind of let things loose, free flowing, and West Virginia's offense put up numbers. So how much of that was the players, how much of that was Chad Scott's coaching? That's what I think is so great, is that not only is he going to get to develop, and if he goes elsewhere as another offensive coordinator somewhere else, so be it, but also retaining Jaheim White. Saw right before I started recording this video on social media, it was Mountaineer James, J-Dub, posting like a clip from an Instagram live of Jaheim White, in which he asked the question, if Chad Scott would have left or not been retained, would you have hit the transfer portal? And he shakes his head, yes. So, you don't want to keep guys, as we've like witnessed from the basketball team turnover from last year to this year, that you don't keep coaches just for the hope and prospect that they keep these players, with them from season to season. But, given again C.J. Donaldson's transfer, given and it's Jaheim White would have hit the door too. We're really only talking about 3 players who I feel like who really were contributing members to this team from a year ago, especially offensively, in Nico Marchiol, Jaheim White, and Rodney Gallagher. So you would be really starting from scratch, and I already do think they're kind of starting from scratch. On the offensive side of the ball, and the defense has had its problems from a roster management standpoint. So keeping Nico Marchiol huge. Love what I've seen also of them bringing in another quarterback from Texas A&M. I don't think that Nico Marchiol needs competition to motivate him. I think that he's been ready for definitely a season now, maybe more, to take the reins and be the starting quarterback of this program. It's just, is he fast enough? Is that what kind of skill set does Coach Rodriguez want in this offense, and does Marchiol mesh with that in his abilities? I think so. I think he can do it. Is he as fast as this Henderson kid? No, but that's what I think. Give it time. Let's see how it plays out in camp. So one of the things that I'm kind of like in a wait and see kind of mode, I kind of talked about it a little bit on the onset, is I'm a little bit rather surprised that General Manager Drew Fabianich, also Scouting Director Trey Nair was let go. Pretty much the entire scouting, recruiting, personnel division department within the football program let go earlier this week. I guess I shouldn't necessarily be shocked because, again, with everything that's happened with the coaching staff from the assistant perspective, you kind of figured that it would be coming elsewhere too, and it came down in the scouting department. So, some people might say, that's just the case of changing head coaches, that you would expect that who was ever previously in there, in the scouting, recruiting, positions within the department, you could expect that. But for me, I'll just evaluate, I'll just weigh in here. 50-50 on Drew Fabianich. I think, and do you credit him for having, because I don't think that Beanie Bishop was signed by the time that he was hired. I think he came in July of 2023. But his paw prints, if Nair was on the high school recruiting and Fabianich was on the transfer portal recruiting, everybody who you would chalk up as last year's transfer commits, under his resume and lack thereof of what happened with these players' recruits. And then, how much does he have an influence on the high school recruiting? Still kind of trying to understand that. But again, was the shortcomings of Drew Fabianich's results for this season and moving forward due to the NIL? Again, if so much was put into last offseason into this season worth of retention, that's where I feel like from a whole program-wide perspective, retention was getting the NIL dollars the most. Then it was filtering down to maybe half transfer portal recruits, half high school recruits. And if West Virginia had limited resources to work with, then Fabianich did the best that he could with what he had. But where West Virginia, and we don't know the numbers, we can only speculate, where it seemed like it put most of its dollars into NIL for transfer portal recruiting last year, it just didn't work out. It didn't look good. I think Garnet Hollis Jr., first and foremost, is the player who comes to mind at the beginning. Going through West Virginia's transfer portal recruits last year, Aiden Garnes, bust. If it wasn't for, I feel like, Andrew Wilson Lamp, I think Aiden Garnes, who's now portaled, was the worst cornerback that West Virginia's had since Pat Miller in 2012. TJ Crandall, you thought with extra years of eligibility, this could be more of a developmental year for him to get to learn the system, get bigger, faster, stronger, adjust to the P4 level to then contribute in 2025. But he hits the road, obviously. Just didn't mesh, didn't fit in, didn't like West Virginia. I think Reed Carrico's the one that you can chalk up to for Drew Fabianich that paid off. If he would have gotten a few more opportunities, I feel dealt with some injuries at times in this season, but could have beat out Trey Lathan for a starting position. I think he would have worked well alongside Josiah Trotter. Didn't want him to go to that bandit position that was worthless, I feel like, in Jordan Leslie's defense. But when he got some opportunities, I really feel like he shined. Ty French, I thought, was talked up so heavily by Fabianich in the offseason, expecting more. But again, unfortunately, at that bandit position that was not used as a pass rusher, was more so just used as a spy in Jordan Leslie's defense. So in this position, was expecting more out of Ty French in just his one and only year in Morgantown. Guess I should have expected that. Jaden Bray, didn't really get to see much of him due to injury all season. TJ Jackson, the best out of this transfer. So one, now two, kind of with Carrico. Xavier Bosley, used that in the same way I spoke to TJ Crandall, kind of developing. And then Jaheim Joseph and Garnet Hollis Jr.'s were busts. So some of the other guys that West Virginia shot with were kind of marginal at best anyway. Isaiah Nayor, who visited, ultimately chose Nebraska, probably the number one recruit. Trying to think, anyone who really made, like Jaden Voisin committed and then kind of pulled back. Same with Taj Rael from Old Dominion, Josh Minkins, who I knew, I think was starting at Louisville. So West Virginia kind of wasn't shooting super high, and that's something I would say I would compare to already with what we've seen. The guys over at West Virginia Sports Illustrated do a tremendous job on tracking all the players who, on their transfer portal tracker, who take visits at West Virginia and whether they choose West Virginia or decide to go elsewhere. So highly recommend you to go to their site and check that out and follow that along. I have that bookmarked to check on that all the time. And looking at some of the targets that West Virginia is seeing take visits, yeah, you have some more Power 4 players looking at West Virginia. I think looking at the prospects of an immediate starting and playing time. So that's cool. Henderson being the headline of this year's class. Did you need to necessarily do that at the quarterback position? No. Where I think West Virginia has some huge holes, namely safety. Yeah, I know Obina Onwuka has withdrawn his name or never completed the paperwork to enter the transfer portal, so he's coming back. But linebacker, cornerback, they still don't have a kicker. You can upgrade at defensive line, the offensive line especially. Now you need a big running back. So many guys I feel like are at the running back position are 5'9" to 5'11" and under 200 pounds. And then at the receiver position too. Are you going to be out there trotting out Warren Singleton, Cyrus Trow, Rodney Gallagher, all these guys who are under 6'1" and under 200 pounds? That criticism from that anonymous coach, I think it was going into 2023, that West Virginia's so small, looks like a MAC team. That's where I don't want to get too critical again, because I'm just holding hope. I'm waiting it out, trying to see again. The vision is that West Virginia is trying to take as many players who are buying into this program under Rich Rodriguez, going to get worked and developed off-season conditioning and in their practices in the spring, develop that hard edge, and that's when we'll see. That's what I'm kind of wondering is West Virginia going to make any sort of splash transfer portal moves? I don't know to the same degree as Texas Tech has already done so far this season, but I don't feel comfortable. If fall camp was next week with the roster West Virginia has, especially at the depth on the offensive line and in the secondary. So a lot of new faces are going to be inserted. It's going to be, you're going to know a few, but again, overhauling this entire roster. And some of the coaches I think I've talked about already. Allie bringing in, retaining Chad Scott. Some of the other, Jack Bicknell Jr. On the offensive line. Looking at his resume, been a journeyman. Yes, he's been at some good places, but never stuck around for all that long. 62 years old. Is he any much of an upgrade over Matt Moore on the offensive line? Would you have rather just kept Matt Moore if that meant kept keeping Tomas Rimac for next season? Same with Kyle Altuner, who decided to follow him to Virginia Tech. I don't know. When Rick Trickett passed on coming up to West Virginia, staying at Jacksonville State with his son Clint Trickett, who's now the new offensive coordinator, I was really wondering if West Virginia was going to try and make a splash move and go to a guy like Garin Justice, who's the run game coordinator, co-offensive coordinator, offensive lineman coach down there at SMU. Would you have had to pay big money to bring him in? Is that money that they've allocated to Allie and or others? Trying to spread it around, spread the money around, perhaps. But that's what I would have liked to see. Or even a guy like Ryan Stanchek down at UTEP, former players. That's what I mean. If we're having this collaboration of old gold and blue, then why not bring two of those guys kind of in? But, trusting in, thinking if they had a good connection, good rapport, good coaching down there at Ole Miss when they were together for a season, then, going to trust in what his abilities and what he can do. And also, just some of these other coaches that are coming up from Jacksonville State is their transition to the Power Five. And it looks like, West Virginia's adding in some additional coaches. So, kind of West Virginia was running on a bit of a skeleton crew, it seemed like, from a coaching perspective this past offseason. This past season, those determinations being made last season. So you now have a nickel Sam coach, both a safeties and a corners coach. So more attention being put on one position rather than putting Shadon Brown over 3 safeties and 2 corners and trying to make it all work. So, that's kind of a lot to go back and forth on about roster management. One of the things that also kind of I'm indifferent to, I guess, talking about the departure of Trey Nair is, keep a lot of kudos that he received, and myself included even on the early signing day video about keeping together this class, even though Neil Brown was fired like a day or two earlier. But what I will still contend, and I saw the vision, I understood kind of in parceling through some of the other interviews that he was on, is the idea was West Virginia was going to, from a high school recruiting standpoint, was going to try and, just like Rodriguez has done, did years ago and is trying to do currently, is trying to get as many players as they possibly could to the Johnny Majors kind of way at Pitt back in the 70s, to try and end up finding 1 or 2 guys, over the years, as they got into the strength and conditioning program, as they got into the nutrition program, would develop by the time that they were a 3rd or 4th year player that they were ready to go and contribute. And if that meant that some guys were filtering out of the program, hitting the portal along the way, then so be it. But my contention is, and we've seen enough cases in point of this, there over the last few seasons, West Virginia had a lot of those guys who were getting to those third and fourth years, hadn't contributed anything, and then were hitting the transfer portal and they were going down to the G5 or lower. And they just weren't good enough. Like some of the ones who are currently on this roster, a Sullivan Weedman. The fact that he didn't get choosing to go to UMass on the offensive line, a fourth-year player. Will Dixon going to Rhode Island. Jalen Anderson still doesn't have an offer. Let's take a look. I know Justin Terry added late. Trey Lathan is a guy who, might come back to West Virginia, but still doesn't have. Jaheim Joseph, Raleigh Collins, Josiah Jackson. Collins being a fourth-year guy, third-year guy. Aiden Tagaloa Nelson is on the basketball team. So that's what I mean, is they were trying to bring in like the class of cornerbacks, I would say, this past season. Chris Henry, Keon Washington, Keyshawn Robinson. How many of those guys, third, fourth year down into the system are ready to play at the Power 4 level or just never going to be Power 4 level players? And that's what I think has gotten West Virginia into trouble, is the talent identification at the high school level. Now, yes, if you shoot for better prospects, 4-star guys, and West Virginia still has gone 17 years without a 5-star high school recruit, then, yeah, I know it's still an inexact science, but, the prospect is there of that player being a contributor down the line. And it's going to cost more in NIL money to do so. So that's why it seemed like West Virginia was putting its eggs in the basket of 1 or 2 commits per class who were 4-star quality. Day Farmer, Josiah, Josiah Trotter, previously Rodney Gallagher. And just to see some of these guys like a Day Farmer, who I kind of had it all along pegged as this was a 1-year guy. Love the limelight, love the recruiting aspect of college football more than actually the game itself. It's just disappointing. It's disappointing when you see that basically the 2024 class has fallen apart already. Farmer, Trotter, I know he was 2023, but it's concerning, and that's one of the reasons why I'm sure that Rich looked at Fabianich, looked at Nair, and just said, I know that Fabianich had only been there a year and a half, Nair a little bit longer, but I don't trust your abilities. I don't trust, I trust my guys, or I trust Zach Alley enough that he's going to go and find. I'm sure Alley had a conversation with Rich and said, hey, I got this guy here at Oklahoma that's looking to make a move and make a step up. Trust me here. And he's getting as much of a leeway as anybody, Alley in. And then that's why West Virginia hiring Chuck Lilly. So how much of an impact is Lilly having already on any of these commits? I don't know. If he's only had a cup of coffee in Morgantown, if it's all going through Rich, if Rich is looking at the tape of all these players in the transfer portal, or or is it the assistant coaches who already have connections? Again, West Virginia was burned by this in 2018 to 2019 and even into 2020 with all of these G5 quality players that Neil Brown, brought in as high school recruits, that would have been probably good enough to play at Troy, but then to play at the Power 4 level, that's where I'm a little bit concerned. So I like some of these moves that West Virginia has made, in also the mold of thinking of let's hire the staff first. Let's get it right on the staff and have a balance of young and old. Old, not necessarily being a negative connotation, but veterans, seasoned with experience that can still also mentor some of the, younger guys, but also having the younger guys And maybe West Virginia uses some of these guys, in higher capacity to recruit and analyze and both transfer portal and high school prospects more so than on-field coaching. That's what I don't know. I think that's what we'll try and learn a little bit more of as the off season goes along. But that's what I think listening to the Mike Kazaza and Chris Anderson podcast with on 247 Sports, it sounded like that was kind of the route that West Virginia was trying to trend toward. And to have an analyst on your staff like Noel Devine, who, what more can you say about his abilities in Morgantown and what his highlight tape is, from both high school and college, and how he can speak that to running backs. So I like that. It took a while. It took what I felt like was a little uncomfortable because you see these transfer portal prospects left and right. It seemed like Texas Tech already wrapped up all of its transfer portal recruiting by January 1st, and they have the number 1 class in the country. And they were getting guys from Power 4 schools to come to Lubbock, playing in the Big 12, trying to cash all in, go for it for a Big 12 title in 2025. So perhaps, I know there's still a lot of stuff that needs to happen between now and August, but perhaps that this is going to just be more so of a foundational year. Again, weeding out of the guys who are weeding out of the guys who are not Power 4 potential, either currently or in the future. Then weeding out of the guys who, for one reason or another have a bad attitude or not buying into the program, only there for the NIL dollars and are not as coachable. Perhaps that was the butting of heads that that Rodriguez had with Hudson Clement, and said, fine, or really just money talks at the end of the day, and that's what he wanted to go do, was go and cash in anywhere, no matter where it was. Even though I think he's making a wrong decision, or something that he's going to regret whenever he's later 20s, 30s, 40s, rest of his life. So that is what it is there. And we just got to slow play this. And, put the trust, unfortunately, like the trust the climb mantra. But that Rodriguez is going to take the players that are on the roster, find the best starters as possible out of this offseason into the spring. Then he'll have a better idea of what West Virginia needs to go pursue coming into the offseason. So I don't think that we should critique just yet if we're seeing, half or more of these transfer portal commits coming from Jacksonville State. Or I know West Virginia just brought in a running back from the Division II level. Or, if they're all, or if we get a balance, of guys from Power 4 schools with additional years of eligibility, knowing that they might not be, starters in 2025, but maybe 2026, like a whole year of the program. So if we're willing to give that kind of grace, or were at some points, myself included, I feel like definitely 2023 into 2024 to Neil Brown, that's what we have to do with Rich Rodriguez. Just kind of a wait and see, feel it out. You're going to clutch some pearls and worry when you see, again, all of these big name stars that West Virginia had leave the program, and and West Virginia's replacing them with guys from the FCS level or the G5 level, and like, oh gosh, is this what Neil Brown did all over again, in the hopes and prospects that Rodriguez and his staff are going to maximize all of these players' potential. And I like that. So love to know your thoughts. 44 minutes in, I think that's kind of where I want to stand for this video. I think this is a good checkpoint. If I don't think we need to get in nitty gritty on all of the transfer portal commits, all of the coaches, stuff like that. I think I can check back again, maybe in a month or so. As we're staring down when spring practice is, talk about the schedule whenever that's released, stuff like that. But a good checkpoint now that the staff is pretty much complete. Transfer portal, closing. So nobody, else that's currently on the team will be, hitting the portal who will then be eligible for spring practice. Some players are starting to commit to West Virginia. The start of the new school semester will be happening soon. So then that means like off-season conditioning and workouts, and the reckoning will continue. And then we'll talk more about basketball. So love to know your thoughts, good, bad, or indifferent, on either the coaches, the players. Are you worried, or are you not concerned at all? Let Rodriguez have this. Where are you at on your concern meter, happy meter? Are you still as juiced as ever as you were on that day, the Pat McAfee press conference and stuff like that? So I'd love to know how you feel. So thanks for tuning into my video. If you like this video, please like it so more Mountaineer fans can see it across YouTube. I know there are a bunch of different other YouTubers, content creators out there, so it really means a lot to me whenever you like this video, so then more people can see it and get those views up. And I'm really thankful for all my subscribers. To get over 400 for the 2024 year just means I got to bring it even stronger in 2025. And I thank each and every one of you. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell your dog that I do this each and every week and have a lot of fun doing it. And it's a crazy off season already, and only going to get crazier. So I'm going to try and bring it to you as best I can over these next coming months. So hail West Virginia, spot the ball, let's go.